What do we believe in as Americans? The Declaration of Independence, unalienable rights, respect for the individual. This is key. Individual liberty, individual property rights, unalienable rights, God-given. There it is in our founding document, the Declaration of Independence. Natural law, the law of nature. This is so crucial. You cannot have freedom if you don't respect the sovereignty of the individual, each of us as individual human beings. Otherwise, you have these horrendous totalitarian regimes, these centralized powers with iron fists. Mark, why are you getting into this? I'll tell you why. Because we found a clip where Kamala Harris told us what her views are of human nature and where she would take this country. Now, either she is a rabid Marxist scholar who embraces it, or she's a blithering idiot. But either way, as President of the United States, she would push this agenda because we know Joe Biden has through executive orders. When you keep talking about equity as the end game, equity is the end game, that's about dehumanizing the individual. This is what totalitarian regimes do. Equity, we got to get to the end game. Everybody's the same. That's the Khmer Rouge. That is Mao. That is sick. So I want you to listen to this. This is Kamala Harris explaining her totalitarian ideology, which is pure Marxism. Not from me, from her. Go.
It has to be about a goal of saying everybody should end up in the same place. And since we didn't start in the same place, some folks might need more. Equitable distribution.
But we also need to fight for equity, understanding not everyone starts out at the same place.
So there's a big difference between equality and equity. Equality suggests often everybody should get the same thing.
That's not what equality means. Not under our system. Equality means access to equal justice, to human rights, to a just rule of law. It doesn't mean everybody gets the same thing. Go ahead.
That often assumes everybody started out in the same place.
Nobody assumes everybody started out in the same place. We are individual human beings. How could everybody start out at the same place? We're a diverse nation with diverse backgrounds. Certain people work harder. People may be mentally or physically handicapped. Some people are born poor and get wealthy. Some people are born wealthy and get poor. That's the nature of a dynamic, vigorous society, where we, the individuals, rule over ourselves. Go.
As opposed to equity, which is everyone should end up in the same place. And if you then understand not everybody started out in the same place, you understand some people need more. So we all end up in the same place.
So we all end up in the same... Does this sound like we're all going to end up in a gulag? What the hell does she mean? We're all going to end up in the same place. She's either completely moronic or a hardcore leftist ideologue. And I'm banking on both. Go ahead.
We are proud of the fact that equity is one of our guiding principles. Proud of the fact that we understand equality is important, but not everybody starts out on the same base. We see that people in our country are having an experience that is not equal. So when we talk about the work we are doing here together, it is recognizing that and being guided by this principle of what we must do in the spirit and in the interest of equity. To put equity firmly at the center of our economic policy.
It goes on and on and on because this is how she speaks. She gets in her head a couple of sentences, and it's not just this, it's other, and she regurgitates it. And it's just over and over and over again to the point of absolute and complete idiocy. She does not believe in capitalism. She does not believe in freedom. She does not believe in the Declaration and the Constitution. She views human nature as something that the government is to control. Central government will determine equity. We're all supposed to end up in the same place. We all end up in the same place. And let's say we don't. Then what are you going to do? What are you going to do? We've seen this play out throughout the world. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard her. That's a prescription for tyranny and totalitarianism, which leads to horrendous things. She doesn't even embrace the American experiment. She doesn't even know or rejects the founding of America, that it's based on individual liberty. Go ahead, look at the Bill of Rights. Look at the Declaration of Independence. It's about individualism. It's not we all end up in the same place. No, we don't all end up in the same place. Some work harder than others, some are smarter than others, some develop things, some create things, some are great athletes, some are not. I mean, this is a dynamic, a vibrant society. We don't all end up in the same place, and that's not the government's job. My God, this woman wants to be president of the United States? It's worse. It goes on. Here she is basically comparing customs to the perception of the Ku Klux Klan. Go.
The Klan was what we would call today a domestic terrorist group.
Why? Why would we call them domestic terrorist group?
Because they tried to use fear and force to change political environment.
And what was the motivation for the use of fear and force?
It was based on race and ethnicity.
Right. Are you aware of the perception of many about how the power and the discretion at ICE is being used to enforce the laws? And do you see any parallels?
I do not see any parallels between sworn
I'm talking about perception.
officers and agents.
I'm talking about perception.
I do not see a parallel between what is constitutionally mandated as it relates to enforcing the law.
Are you aware that there's a perception?
I see no
Are you aware that there's a perception?
That puts ICE in the same category as the KKK. Is that what you're asking me?
No, I'm very specific about what I'm asking you. Are you aware of a perception that the way that the discretion
I see no parallel.
I'm not finished.
I see none.
I'm not finished. I'm not finished. Are you aware that there's a perception that ICE is administering its power?
You know, ladies and gentlemen, the combination of stupidity and arrogance is on full display right here. Go.
Fear and intimidation, particularly among immigrants, and specifically among immigrants coming from Mexico and Central America. Are you aware of the perception?
I do not see a parallel between the power and the authority that ICE has to do its job and the agents and officers who do it professionally and excellently with lots of compassion.
Sir, how can you be the head of an agency and be unaware of how your agency is perceived by certain communities?
There is a lot of perceptions in the media and in the public that are incorrect about the agency.
But the perception exists. Would you agree?
So the perception is, according to her, because obviously she's been on the border so many times as the borders are, obviously she speaks Spanish, so she's talking to all the Mexican and people from Central America. She's full of it. But the perception, she says, is that our ICE, Americans doing their jobs to protect this country, are perceived like the Klan, the Ku Klux Klan. Now think about this. But it's worse. Here she signals openness to abolishing ICE on MSNBC just a few years ago. Go.
Listen, I think there's no question that we've got to critically re-examine ICE and its role and the way that it is being administered and the work it is doing. And we need to probably think about starting from scratch because there's a lot that is wrong with the way that it's conducting itself, and we need to deal with that.
What do you think should be the alternative to ICE?
Well, first of all, I don't think that the government should be in the position of separating families, and that is clearly what is part of what's happening at ICE and DHS.
So she doesn't believe the government should be involved with separating families. Folks, the government is not in the job of separating families. This is an ignoramus who hasn't gone to the border as the borders are, which she was. These men come across the border holding the hands of little boys and little girls. Right there on the spot, the Border Patrol and eventually ICE have to determine if that man, as an example, is in fact the father of those children, or if he's kidnapped those children, if those children are going to be sold into sex slavery and other horrendous things. So they're separated to determine who is who. And as nice as it would be to pull up a computer and go into the software and check it out, it doesn't work that way, particularly when you have individuals coming from the Middle East or Far East Asia and so forth and so on. They're not in any computer. So that's why they're, quote, separating them from families. This is really horrendous the things that she says about federal law enforcement, the things that she says about what American society should be, this is as radical and as imbecilic as anything we've ever heard from any politician ever. And I'm not done. Here she is praising defund the police movement in resurfaced video months before she denounced it. Go.
Here's the thing. Defund the police. The issue behind it is that we need to reimagine how we are creating safety. And when you have many cities that have 1/3 of their entire city budget focused on policing, we know that is not the smart way and the best way or the right way to achieve safety. This whole movement is about rightly saying, we need to take a look at these budgets and figure out whether it reflects the right priorities. We have for generations now been defunding public schools.
There she is, the tough prosecutor. There she is, Ms. Public Safety. There she is. One shibboleth after another. But I want you to take a look at this one. You haven't seen this one either. This isn't that long ago, 2016, giving a speech to the Islamic Center of Southern California. Check this one out. Go.
You must have the courage to object when they use that term, radical Islamic terrorism, which ignores how Muslims have overwhelmingly been the greatest victims of terror. Also have the courage to reject that term illegal alien.
Boy, the list is long of the terms that we are not allowed to use, ladies and gentlemen. Radical Islamic terrorism. Don't you ever use that term. Illegal aliens. Don't you ever use that term. Woman. Don't use that term unless you're talking about her, because she wants to be the first black woman president. We celebrate that. Otherwise, we don't use the word woman, because it's offensive. We have to find pronouns. How do we know? Well, Associate Justice Jackson on the Supreme Court won't use the term woman and wouldn't define it. But, of course, use the term woman the way they want you to use the term woman. So don't use radical Islamic terrorism or illegal alien. Here's a short list I put together. Where does she stand? Eliminate fracking so you can all freeze to death. Open border. Decriminalize illegal immigration. That from the border czar. Oh, but she's not the border czar. No, she's not anything. Free health care for illegal immigrants. That'll destroy our health care system. Student loan cancellation in violation of the Constitution. So all you folks, 2/3 of the nation that never went to a 4-year college, never graduated, you get to subsidize all of those who did, even though it violates the Constitution. Eliminate private health care. Some of you have private health care and you like it. Even some unions have negotiated hard for private health care. She would abolish it. She would force you all into government-run socialist health care. And I'm sure they'll do a fantastic job like they do on the border. Or maybe the $42.5 billion to hook up everyone to internet. She was in charge of that. Nobody's been hooked up who was supposed to be. Infanticide. She doesn't just support abortion or Roe v. Wade. She supported S-510, a Senate bill that, among other things, outlawed nationwide parental notification if a child's going to have an abortion and required in every state abortion right up to birth, paid for by the taxpayers. That's her position on abortion. Why doesn't she show us what that looks like, since she's now the abortion candidate? If it's just a choice, if it's about reproductive rights, wow, that's a weird word, then show it to us. But they won't. What else? She opposes school choice except for her own stepdaughter, even for poor families, even for black kids going to lousy schools. She opposes Title IX. She would destroy women's equality in sports, a 52-year-old civil right, which also gives women equal access to scholarships and extracurricular activities. Why? Well, because of the trans agenda. We talked about defunding the police, dismantling ICE, supporting sanctuary cities and states to this day. She supports nationwide registration of guns. She thinks, oh, that's a good idea. Opposes parental rights. She supported Merrick Garland's memo attacking parents. So she believes the government and her favorite, the AFT, the radical left-wing teachers union, should raise your children. She supported discrimination against Asian students who were discriminated against by Harvard for admissions. She trashed that decision. Oh, well, what about Israel? She repeats the most anti-Semitic blood libel. She did it the other day against the Jewish people in Israel, against the elected Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, and their citizen soldiers. She regurgitates Hamas's civilian casualty numbers without attacking Hamas for attacking their own people, killing them and beating them when they steal the food from them. That's a long way from President Harry Truman to Kamala Harris. Boycotts Israel's prime minister, historic speech in Congress. Sends the word to the Hamas hostage holders, we have your back. That's what she did. But she speaks to CARE. CARE is all supportive of Kamala Harris. CARE is a Hamas front group. It was founded in Philadelphia. The FBI wiretapped the meeting. There was big federal litigation. Everybody knows CARE. CARE is a Hamas front group, and she embraces them. They support her. That tells you where she is. And she and Biden support withholding weapons from Israel. What are they withholding? 120-millimeter tank ammunition, 120-millimeter mortar ammunition, medium tactical vehicles, medium air-to-air missiles. They're withholding F-15s, F-135 engines that the Israelis need for their F-35s. What else? JDAM, what are those? That converts unguided bombs into precision-guided munitions. Withholding it. What else are they withholding? MK-84, 2,000-pound bombs, because they don't want them bombing the Gazans, which is what they've been doing all along, don't you know? Just ask Hamas. Rifles from the Israeli National Police Force, 338 medium machine guns, Sig Sauers we call them, and more guided missile systems on hold. Wow. Aren't they fantastic? What else? The Constitution. She opposes the Electoral College. Her support for radical District Attorney Bragg. She brags about this conviction against Trump, which tells you what? She's opposed to free speech, due process, equal protection, the right to competent counsel, excessive fines with Letitia James. So she opposes, literally, the 1st, 5th, 6th, 8th, 14th Amendments of the Constitution. She has been at war with the Supreme Court. She doesn't believe it should be independent. She wanted to pack the court. She wants to destroy it, destroy certain justices. She doesn't believe in separation of power. She believes in only her own power, which is why she opposes the filibuster rule. If we can't get what we want, we need to roll it through the Senate. She supports the 1619 Project and CRT, which are Marxist, racist attacks on America's very founding. There's one final thing that nobody talks about. She's hated by people who worked for her. Daily Mail, Kamala Harris, the soul-destroying bully. Former staff exposed shock details of degrading tirades, decades-long toxic behavior that left people in tears and saw them quit at unprecedented levels for the people. Politico from 2021, not a healthy environment, Kamala Harris's office rife with dissent. New York Times, how Kamala Harris's campaign unraveled, and they go into some detail of how she abused her staff. National Review, people really, really do not want to work for Kamala Harris from 2022. Here we have Washington Post, a Kamala Harris staff exodus, reignites questions about her leadership style and her future ambitions. The rumors started circulating in July. Vice President Harris' staff was wilting in a dysfunctional and frustrated office. And then, of course, the LA Times, harassment and retaliation claims during Kamala Harris's time as California's top cop led to $1.1 million in settlements. Now, this is the real Kamala Harris. But you won't hear about her on CNN or MSNBC or the New York Times or the Washington Post or all the rest of the corrupt, cover-up, censorship media that told you that Joe Biden is the smartest man since Albert Einstein and then told you that he's the dumbest man, broomed him out of office, and then brings us Kamala Harris. She's just fantastic. Let me tell you something. She's worse than Biden. She is a disaster on a personal level, on an intellectual level, on a policy level. The fact that she's vice president of the United States should be scary enough. I'll be right back.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.